Hello and welcome to the mill. I am your host, Dusty Crane, and this week I wanted to have my voice fully back, but you can't always get what you want, I guess. What I wanted to talk about is the mill itself. You see, since starting the mill, my involvement in Stonemaier games has changed, and that may affect how you view the content I make here. So I thought it would be a good time to revisit what the mill is and what my purpose is here. The mill, in my mind, is meant to do two things. It's meant to inform and hopefully entertain as we discuss current Stonemaier topics. That is primarily what I do here, but it also serves to shine a spotlight on fan creations that surprise and delight me. This one in particular has slid off my radar slightly recently as my time to dig into these has fallen off, but there are still projects that catch my eye, and of course I have to draw some focus to them. So that's all well and good. That's probably what drew you here in the first place, but you may have missed that little tag that pops up when the videos start, and the one that says paid content. The Mill is a Stonemaier sponsored show. Without mincing words, the mill is paid for by the company I primarily talk about. And at first glance, that might seem really problematic. And I understand your concerns. It's one that I would share too. However, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not even allowed to review Stonemaier stuff. So what am I doing here then? Well, that's sort of tied to how I got here in the first place. I'm first and foremost a fan of Stonemaier games. Well before they sponsored me, I was a fan who showed up in the Facebook groups to chat about the games. I was a fan who would show up in the Facebook live chats. And I was a fan who was just active in the BGG forums. I just enjoyed talking about Stonemaier games as those were the board games that resonated with me the most. Jamie approached me about sharing my enthusiasm on YouTube, and here I am to this day. So what's in it for me? Well, free board games from a company I love is a really nice perk. Not going to lie to you. I get the games before they're announced so that I can have stuff to share as soon as Jamie is ready to lift the veil. Stonemaier has also purchased much of the equipment I use to make the show. Camera, lights, various cables, clamps, software, etc. And yes, there's money. I get a monthly payment from Stonemaier with the agreement that I will not monetize the mill with ads. It's very important to Jamie. He doesn't have any ads on his YouTube videos, and he doesn't want them on the mill either if he's sponsoring it. Typically, this type of agreement where there's money, taking place, it being exchanged, is rife for abuse. However, that abuse usually occurs when the money is enough to compromise your integrity. And this isn't that. I have a full-time job that pays well, some might say really well, and when you factor in the time to research, film, edit, prepare, not to mention the YouTube stuff itself like channel art, the description for each episode, if I was doing this for the money, I'd be better off working a fast food job. Stonemaier isn't paying my mortgage or even my car payment for that matter. And I say none of this to disparage Stonemaier because this is the agreement we made. And I'm doing it primarily because I enjoy doing it. There are some weeks that are harder than others, and there have been many times throughout the years I've been doing this that I've thought to myself, this is hard. This is time consuming. My enjoyment is draining. And then I'll have an amazing week where the video practically makes itself and we'll have a great discussion in the comments, or there's a new product release that's fun to talk about, and I'm energized once again. And I ride that good feeling until a hard video rolls around and the cycle repeats. So why am I telling you all of this? And what part of my involvement in Stonemaier has changed since I started the mill? That's a fair question. So last January, news broke that Stonemaier acquired the trademark for Libertalia, and someone brought it to my attention. I debated whether or not to cover it on the show because when it comes to speculation, having a trademark guide you almost feels like cheating. If I have a name, the speculation almost writes itself. It only took a couple of weeks, though, before Libertalia's trademark holding was widely being talked about on BGG, so I felt like it was okay to come forward and that I actually should come forward with that news since it was out there. So I did a speculation video where I said, It's almost certain that Codename Sale, the name given in Stonemeier's monthly progress charts, was Libertalia. And it was 100% speculation. I didn't know anything at that point. But Sale equals Libertalia was hardly a stretch. Pirate game, sailing, pirate boats have sails. It wasn't much of a leap. And then, in February, Jamie made it official. Codename Sale, and that was this February, Jamie made it official. Codename Sale is Libertalia Winds of Galecrest. And I made a video sharing the news. And I get a comment that says, "What's funny is there's no way you didn't know this all along." Now, let me say that this comment is still there, and the discussion that followed is still there. Because while I read it with a tone in mind that wasn't kind, it was a fair point. In the conversation that followed, we came to understand each other. I learned where they were coming from, and they learned where I was coming from. Now, I'm going to ask, if you do go read that conversation and you find that you have something you want to contribute, that you please share your thoughts in this video and not by piling on that commenter. I don't think anyone who watches this video would give anyone else grief, but I guess I just wanted to specifically ask that no one pile on. They were gracious enough to share what they didn't think, or that they didn't think I was doing anything malicious, and I appreciate that. And I welcome that kind of feedback too. So again, ultimately a positive. So anyway, getting back to it, I mentioned that when I made that video in January, I had 2 years ago, 1 year, I don't know. Anyway, when I made that video that Libertalia was Codename Sale, the original speculation video, it was 2 or 3 months afterwards that Jamie asked me to proofread, and the title was Libertalia. I explained in the comment that I knew from that point on that Libertalia was a thing, but I never had official confirmation that Codename Sale was Libertalia. I explained that while I've never signed an official NDA, Stonemaier still expects that anyone doing work for them prior to a title's launch is kept secret. To specifically call attention to it, after I started doing the mill, I became a proofreader for Stonemaier. That means that there have been times where I've known about a title that I had to remain mum about. How I handle these situations is important to me. I want to be fair to both you, the folks viewing the show, but also Stonemaier, who makes the show able to be done. Plus, if I ever violated even that sort of handshake NDA, I'd certainly never be proofreading again, and I likely would not be doing the mill either. I can't imagine that Stonemaier would continue to sponsor a show being made by someone who betrayed the trust that they'd given. I'd imagine Jamie would either just let the show die, or he'd ask that I turn over the credentials to the channel, which I would. That was a question he asked me before I even started. He said, if you don't have the interest to continue doing the show, would you be willing to turn the channel over to someone else? And I said I would, because I would want the show to go on without me if I just lost my interest in board games or Stonemaier games in particular. Since, in general, I don't like lying, I began to view my role on the mill as having two parts. One, I was a Stonemaier fan who watched the company and their moves very carefully, and I've gotten pretty good at anticipating moves based on observations over time. When your company is largely driven by one guy, and that guy is a pretty open book, either through his company blog, his personal one, or even his many YouTube videos, you start to notice patterns emerge. So that was role number one, sniffing out whatever I could and making guesses based on those observations. Then, whether by my personal involvement or proofreading or a trademark leak, my role would change to that of the voice of the fan. So that is, once I knew something, knew it, I became the voice of the fan. So let's take Viticulture's expansion, for example. This is a title that I proofread. This is a title that I actually have a copy of right now underneath this table here. And that is probably part of the problem of why I've not done the best job of disclosing what I know when I know, because it feels braggy, and I hate that. But I'm learning it's important to share just so that you know which me you're getting, whether you're getting me the fan or me the voice of the fan. So back to the point, Viticulture's expansion. Jamie shared a sketch of the cover back on Viticulture's anniversary. He announced the artwork would be done by Andrew Bosley and shared what appeared to be a pencil drawing on the cover. people noticed that there were ships on the horizon of this cover. There was a well-received fan expansion, or at least the idea of an expansion that included imports and exports, and the further you had to deliver a wine order, you're delaying victory points, but ultimately you get more victory points for it. And so there was a bit of support around the idea that maybe Jamie worked with a fan designer again, as he did with Kai for the Wind Gambit, as he did with Ryan for the Rise of Fenris, and even Hobie and Vienna with My Little Scythe. I can't tell you if the import-export thing is right, and I can't tell you if the guest designer thing is right. I've learned there's a difference between I can't tell you because I don't know, and I can't tell you because I do know, and I just can't share anything before it's officially announced. What I can tell you is that in the past, especially as it relates to Libertalia, I've allowed that voice of the fan to share stuff that was true and that I knew was true because the chatter in BGG circles was convinced. Board Game Geek was convinced that Codename Sale was Libertalia due to that trademark, and it was, and I stayed the course. I continued to say I believed Codename Sale is Libertalia, not because I knew it was, but because you believed it was. Once I knew the truth, I let myself be a conduit for the community. The person who spoke up said I needed to decide what I am. I'm either a fan like you, making guesses like the rest of you, or I can be a proofreader and playtester, but I can't be both. I disagree with that premise. I believe I've done a good job of being both, but I do agree that I could do better. I don't playtest anymore because playtesters know the lay of the land much earlier than proofreaders. It's not entirely true. I'd welcome the chance to playtest if invited. It's just that I failed the test for playtesters. I did. As willing as I am to help in any way that I can, apparently I would not jive with what Jamie is looking for in playtesters. I am, however, apparently well qualified to proofread, which I have been doing. In the interest of disclosure and not bragging, the current unreleased titles that I've proofread are the Viticulture expansion and the next Wingspan expansion. I'm telling you this now, but when Viticulture comes up in the next month, which it will, or which is likely to, I'll say so again. I proofread it. This actually just came to mind too, so I'll share it. If a new fan theory pops up and gains traction about what the Viticulture expansion includes, will I mention it on the mill? Absolutely, I will. If enough fans are sure of a theory, that's when I take up the mantle of the voice of the fan. It's not my job to redirect or steer you away from the truth. That said, if another theory pops up that has a lot of support and I know it's wrong, I'm going to promote that one too. Because I always ask myself, if I didn't know, would this convince me it was right? And if the answer is yes, then I share it. I guess I already said this as it relates to Libertalia, but whatever. I guess it bear repeating twice. I felt the concerns that were brought to me in the comments of that announcement video were important and valid, despite my disagreeing with the statement that I can't be both fan and proofreader. As always, though, while I've been the one sitting in front of the camera and talking at you, this has always been our show. And I'd like to hear your thoughts. How do you feel would be best for me to disclose what I've proofread? Should I specifically mention it aloud when it comes up? Should I have a caption pop up on screen? My first responsibility is to you. Jamie has never had a say in what I produce here, aside from it being Stonemaier related. And, of course, not anything that I'm not supposed to talk about in terms of violating my handshake NDA. I actually took these concerns to Jamie too, and I wondered if he agreed, if he felt that I should step down from one role or the other. He told me that he didn't have any feelings one way or the other about it, and that I should do what feels right to me. And so here we are. More transparency feels like a good compromise. He did mention that maybe I could just have some kind of disclaimer up front, and I like that idea. I've been sort of brainstorming what that might look and sound like. Pardon me. And I had something like, hello and welcome to the Mill, a Stonemaier sponsored fan channel highlighting whatever cool Stonemaier or Stonemaier adjacent content caught my eye this week. I'm your host, Dusty Crane, and let's get to it. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that too. And that's all I had for you this week. I wanted to touch base and give you the current state of the mill, get your thoughts and just level set so we're all on the same page. This is not the channel to get official Stonemaier news before Stonemaier is ready to share it. This is the place to get Stonemaier news from a fan who's paying close attention. But no, it's not a place where I'm going to just outright tell you something I don't have the right to share. I would hope that would speak in my favor, but I understand we all have different expectations. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you had any other questions, feel free to ask those. What do you think is the best way to provide transparency, and how should I disclose my sponsorship beyond even just the paid content flag on the video? Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for hanging out with me today and for tolerating my voice here as long as you have. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you too. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks for watching.